Hello, good afternoon. So I'm Luke Stagnetto, and if I may look familiar, or perhaps my name rings a bell, it's because I'm the boy who stood as a candidate at the European elections in 2019. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that experience, perhaps addressing some of the more common questions I've been asked, so the hows and the whys. And as to avoid this talk developing into a rambling monologue perhaps, whereby I recount my anecdotes and stories and you inevitably get bored, I thought it'd be best to use the platform to talk to you a little bit about social media in local politics. After all, as a 21-year-old politics student, social media and politics are two subjects I know plenty about. And at the risk of sounding patronising, I think we could all do with a little more education on. The European elections. We now know that the 2019 European elections were the last time that the United Kingdom and Gibraltar would participate in EU elections. And it almost never happened too. If you cast your mind back to March 2019, a Theresa May Conservative government went to the EU and negotiated a deal which failed to pass through Parliament twice. It was that second time when Theresa May, with a croaky voice, announced over the dispatch box that she was going to have to ask for an extension to the implementation period. Now, what you've got to understand, and I probably won't be doing myself any favours here, is that I'm a bit of a politics nerd. I'm the kind of guy who's got BBC News on TV all the time, and if not, it's BBC Parliament, often to the dismay of my housemates. I read the May deal, and I didn't think it was going to pass through Parliament, irrespective of how many times they tried. Partly because of the composition of Parliament, but also because of that infamous Irish backstop. So, I made a prediction. I predicted that the implementation period would be extended past May 2019, meaning that UK and Gibraltar would have to participate in the EU elections. No one, however, seemed to agree with me. I, on the other hand, was convinced. So with this newfound epiphany of mine, I went to consult my counsel, my dad. That conversation went a little bit like this. I said I want to stand as a candidate this May. He told me to emigrate. I said, seriously, I want to stand as a representative of the ignored Gibraltarian youth and Remain vote. He didn't think the UK would have to put forward candidates. And he ended with that little conversation by saying, "This won't happen, mate." It turns out I was right. It turns out I was right. My dad, who stood as a candidate in 2009, got the ball rolling. And before I knew it, I was having a meeting with the Deputy Chief Minister of Gibraltar, Dr. Joseph Garcia, the purpose of which I'm convinced was to somehow convince him to allow a 20-year-old student with zero political experience the opportunity to not only represent the Liberal Party here locally, but the wider Gibraltarian community as a whole. Soon after, I signed the necessary documents, and it all began. A suggestion made an almost, jest became a reality even more unfathomable. So I've covered how. Why is the question I perhaps get asked most often. Why stand as a candidate in an election when you knew you weren't going to get elected? And this presents no better opportunity for me to clear a few things up. Set the record straight, perhaps. I had three clear motivations. Firstly, and I've got to get this right, I was never a Liberal Democrat standing for election in Gibraltar, but I was a Gibraltarian standing for election as a Liberal Democrat. Now, there's a nuanced but important difference there. I was standing to represent our 96% Remain mandate from the 2016 referendum. I was standing because I believed there shouldn't be an election on the rock whereby there isn't a Gibraltarian on the ballot. I was standing to represent the rights and the views of Gibraltarians in the wider European debate. We fought hard for our rights to suffrage at EU elections in the Matthews case 2004, and I thought it was important that that was upheld. It was about flying our flag. It was about representing the people of Gibraltar and telling our story to anyone who would be willing to hear it. And people listened. I did interviews for everyone and anyone who'd take the time to listen to me. The story spread. Oh, sorry, that was meant to come up earlier. The story spread. Picked up locally in the newspapers, social media, radio, and local TV as well. It was picked up by the major tabloids in the UK. Spanish press. I did interviews with French press, Dutch press, and German press. To this day, I have no idea what this says about me. Personally, and most selfishly, my second motivation was, well, it was selfish. It was an opportunity for me to emulate my personal heroes. As I said, my dad stood as a candidate in 2009, and any opportunity to be a little more like him in any way is, in my eyes, an opportunity worth taking. But two, my granddad, who I hope is somewhere here in the audience, was a minister in 1967. He stood on this very stage at the count of the 1967 referendum results. I felt, with the photo of which, by the way, is on the stairs here in the corridor, I felt like I was doing my little bit for Gibraltar, just like they did theirs. And for that reason, I will always cherish my campaign. Furthermore, I stood because the narrative worked. It was almost romantic. I was the youngest candidate at the European elections, a 20-year-old Gibraltarian living in the southwest of England, the region in which I'd be representing, studying politics and international relations at the University of Bristol, the mecca of the Remain mandate in the southwest. I knew it would work, and it did. Which leads me to my candidacy. The campaign, and I know it sounds awfully cliche, really was a roller coaster. Through my campaign, I experienced the highs and the lows of political, social media, and politics in general. I learnt in a couple months more than my 3-year degree could ever offer me. It was a crash course. It was a crash course in people, in campaigning. I experienced the beauty and the hardships of grassroots politics, the bits that people don't see, and the bits you don't read in a textbook. It was the coordination of people. It was the door knocking. It was the leafleting. It was the speech writing. People who I hardly knew were volunteering their precious time, come rain or come shine, to help our campaign because they believed in us and they believed in me. I had political giants on my side too, up and down the main streets, up and down the main street, up and down the hills of Bristol, and across the southwest of England, all to help us and all to help me. I had never felt so popular and never felt so valued in my life. It was truly humbling. The highs were tremendously high, but the lows were pretty low. A little bit of context for you. It was a divisive and contentious election with a highly emotive electorate. Remainers on the one side, as treating the election as a last-ditch attempt to stop Brexit, represented by the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. On the other side of the spectrum were the Brexiteers, heading to the polls to defend their Leave mandate. However, what I want you to bear in mind is that at its fundamentals, the EU elections were an election to form the composition of a parliament belonging to a political and economic union to which we have now left. The whole thing, in hindsight, seems kind of superfluous. But people really cared. To Remainers, I was considered a hero. I was a brave young man representing what he and the people of Gibraltar believed in. I was celebrated. I was inundated with messages of support, in person and online. It was wonderful. To Brexiteers, I was the hostile enemy, wanting to take away their precious Brexit. To them, I was someone who needed to be defeated. And likewise, I received lots of messages from them too. Lots of them. Some of them were honest people with an alternative opinion. We had honest discussions and debates, and I valued it. I enjoyed it. It was educational. Some of them I even managed to convince to vote for me, which was great. Others, however, just weren't so honest. And apologies if you can't see these very well. Others were malicious. They were nasty. They were vile. They were messages designed to hurt me, and they did. I had never been made to feel so lonely or been made to feel so little in my life. My mistake was I was all too happy to share my highs, but I hid my lows. There's this misunderstanding that just because a message is sent online, that it doesn't carry sentiment. And I'm telling you personally that they do. Many of these accounts were anonymous, from what you'd call bots. I know this because they no longer exist. Some of these messages were from local accounts, many of which have also been deleted. Some using local pseudonyms, which looked like real profiles but weren't. With no verification process, however, it is impossible to know who's behind them. They were simply vehicles of online abuse. Which leads me to the 19th of March, 2020. For those of you who haven't made the connection or perhaps just aren't aware, this is the date of the abortion referendum 2020. And it's a date that frightens me. It frightens me because if the messages you saw earlier concerned a bureaucratic debate about regulation and commitment to a political and economic union, well, I'm awfully concerned about the capacity of abuse that may exist in our community when the debate is far more personal, when the debate is centered around a hugely emotive and hugely divisive human rights referendum. I'm frightened because referenda are cruel, cruel instruments of democracy. They present a binary option, an A or a B, to debates which just often aren't so black and white. Worse still, they present a winning and a losing side. The reality, I fear, is that we may all lose as a community. The debate will divide us along lines of gender, by age, by religion, and by personal experiences, no doubt. Dividing homes and dividing families. This is a delicate debate with very personal and very emotional connotations to it. I suspect that we may stand to lose more than we are to gain. Now, the reason I've told you my story today is not to seek your sympathy, but rather your guarantee. Your guarantee that we, as a community, will endeavour to be more respectful towards one another, particularly those whose opinions who we do not share. I'm seeking the guarantee that no one standing up for their personal beliefs would be made to feel as small as I did, be it online or in person. By all means, speak freely, but speak fairly. Don't spread misinformation. Don't be malicious towards one another. By all means, engage in debate, but be considerate, oh my God, be tolerant of other people's opinions. We must be able to agree to disagree. After all, there's far more that unites us than there is that divides us. Thank you.